The Bible said a fool says in his heart, there's no God. It takes high-level foolishness to assume that there's no God and to challenge his being and his existence. Is what? The rightness of God. Now, this rightness of God is a kind of rightness that makes it impossible for God to err. God cannot make mistake. When you hear in the Bible that God cannot lie, it's his righteousness is talking about. And this righteousness is not just about accuracy in knowledge. It's also a dimension of power. You know why it is so? If God looks at this chair and says, this is black, when you look at the chair, you discover that the chair is black. And the chair will not become black. God is powerful. This chair you are seeing that is brown, if God looks at this chair and says, this is black, when you look, the chair will be black. What will shock you is that if they rewind time and go back to when you saw it earlier and you thought it was brown, you will look it, you will discover that it was black. See, as I'm standing now, maybe I'm 5 feet. Is it 5? Maybe I'm 4 feet tall. Those of you who know height, 5. Okay. Maybe I'm 5 feet tall. If God looks at me and said, Mike is 9 feet. If you look at Mike, you will become shocked. You know why? You will see that I'm 9 feet. If you go back to yesterday and see me yesterday, you will discover I will be 9 feet. Because as he has said it, that's how it is. It will not just become, it will be so. And it would have been so and will remain so. So righteousness is not just divine accuracy, it's also divine power that makes everything God says to be what he says. That's why God cannot lie. Even if God were to desire to lie, which he will not, he cannot. Because if he says anything, that's how that thing is. If God shows up now, like he did in Genesis chapter 1, and he looks at everything is in chaos, he said, light be. There was no light anywhere. Do you know where light came from? Light came from darkness. There was no source of light anywhere. When God said light be, darkness had no choice but to release light. That's righteousness. Anything he says, even if the raw material is not there, the thing will still be. That's why he's creator. So God is creator because he's righteous. If he says something, it comes to be. He cannot lie. Now, that righteousness of God gives him a distinction amongst every spirit. So what makes God stand out amongst every spirit is his righteousness. Now, without Christ, it will be impossible for you to be righteous. That's what it means. Because even if you live all your life without sinning, you will still not be righteous. The Bible said there is none righteous. It said no, not one. So all men that lived before Christ, none of them was righteous. Even the ones that can tell you they have never erred, they are not righteous. You know why? Because they cannot meet God's standard. They cannot achieve God's standard. Because God's righteousness is not just his actions, it's also his nature. I may have been born, and since I was born, I've not made any mistake. I'm still not righteous. Because in me is a tendency to make mistakes. And because I can make mistake, it has made me unrighteous, even though I have not made it. So when you are dealing with the subject of righteousness, it is first of all a nature, and it is now an act. And that nature resides only in God. So before Christ came, only God was righteous. Now that Christ has come, God now decided to distribute his righteousness. So in the gospel, one of the major things we preach is righteousness. That we have been made the righteousness of God. Now, as beautiful as this is, there is an error. What is the error? Those who believe in no works, which is hyper grace and prosperity people. You know, their goal is no works. I'm always blessed. Those who believe in that, they teach righteousness as only a nature. They don't teach righteousness as an action. So when you go to such quarters, they tell you and teach you every scripture correctly. How that you have the nature of God now. How that you are as righteous as God is. In fact, nobody can be more righteous than the other. That's how righteousness operates in the context of its nature. Because it is the nature of God imparted to you. So you have the righteousness of Christ. What it means is that you are as righteous as Christ. Because it's the nature of Christ you have. It's just like my son sitting there now. He is as human as me. If you take my DNA to the lab and take my son's DNA to the lab, it will be the same. My DNA will not be more human than my son's DNA. So they will teach you exactly from the standpoint of nature how that you are God's righteousness. But they will stop there. Because they have taught it only from nature, even if you fornicate today, you will come back, they will tell you there's no problem, you are still righteous. That's where the error comes from. So you go to such quarters, you hear of things like immorality. You hear of things like lying. And they treat it as nothing. Somebody can fornicate and lie. Pastor will come and say it's where. In fact, they will use psychology to manage it and continue as if nothing happened. In fact, you can be coming for service. They discover you are fornicating. But because they don't have any other person to lead choir or to sing, you are forgiven. You go and sing. Because the activity is more important than your soul. I tell my people here, if there's nobody to sing, I will show up here. This voice, angels hear it. Men may not like it, but God likes it. I will show up here and do opening prayer and sing and preach and bless you, and we will go home. Choir is not show. It's worshiping God. The Bible said the fool says in his heart, there's no God. It takes high-level foolishness to assume that there's no God and to challenge his being and his existence.